The case starts off like any other in Nick Carter's office. The faint smell of air freshener lingers in the air, the dusty blinds shut out the daylight, and his coffee is long cold. Miriam Stone walks in, dressed to the nines, but looking like she hasn't slept in days. Her husband, Robert, a wealthy businessman, has gone missing. Nick is unimpressed, thinking it's just another husband who needs a change of scenery from his nagging wife. Miriam's nervous energy is palpable as she hands him a stack of photographs and documents. He's been gone for over a week, she insists. No ransom note, no leads, I think someone's taken him. Nick flips through the photos of Robert, a man in sharp suits, always looking perfect. Nick can't help but crack a dry joke. He looks like the kind of guy who'd disappear just to get away from you, he quips. Miriam doesn't laugh. Please kindly take a moment to subscribe to our channel, thank you. As Nick digs into the case, he quickly realizes that Robert's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. The man's business dealings were secretive, his colleagues tight-lipped. The more Nick digs, the more bizarre it becomes. The first real clue, a business card with an address written in Robert's handwriting, feels too easy. The case is already starting to smell fishy, but his mind starts to turn over the possibilities. Who would want to take Robert? Nick's first stop is Robert's office, a sleek, corporate space that feels sterile, like a showroom for rich men who don't care about anything but power. The receptionist barely acknowledges his presence, and the employees are stiff. When Nick shows them a photo of Robert, everyone suddenly remembers a different version of him. He was always in a hurry, one says, always talking about big deals, never sticking around, says another. As Nick pushes for more information, Margaret, Robert's estranged sister, arrives at the office. She's a woman with sharp features and sharper words. She barely acknowledges Nick's existence until he presses her about Robert's possible enemies. Enemies, he had plenty. But I'm not the one to help you, she says dismissively before walking out without another word. Nick watches her leave, wondering if she knows more than she's letting on. Nick then meets Danny, a jittery informant who claims to have seen Robert recently. But when Nick presses him for details, Danny's story starts to wobble, like a poorly told joke. He was here, or maybe there. He was in a hurry. Nick can't shake the feeling that Danny knows something and is deliberately hiding it. At the end of the day, Nick sits alone in his office, pondering the pieces he's gathered. Everything seems like it should add up, but it doesn't. The only thing clear so far, Nick's been drawn into something much deeper than he imagined. The next day, Nick receives an anonymous note with a cryptic riddle written on it. It leads him to a rundown diner on the outskirts of the city, where he meets Samantha, a bartender who seems to know a little too much about his investigation. She's a quirky, no-nonsense woman who seems to enjoy messing with Nick's head, offering him cryptic advice in a steady stream of sarcasm. "You've been looking in the wrong places," she says, passes a drink across the bar to him. "Sometimes the answers are closer than you think." Nick's initial reaction is annoyance, but there's something oddly compelling about Samantha. Despite her offbeat humor and borderline bizarre stories, she seems to have an insight into Robert's disappearance that others lack. They engage in a back and forth, the banter light and comedic, but beneath it, Nick feels the weight of the case pressing in. He leaves the diner feeling both amused and frustrated, and a little unsettled. The riddle leads him to another location that seems completely unrelated to the Caser bookstore that doesn't even sell books, just odd trinkets and strange artifacts. Inside, Nick finds another clue, a half-burned letter in Robert's handwriting, leading him into a web of contradictions. It all feels like a game, but who's playing it and why? As Nick investigates further, the case begins to feel more like a personal unraveling than a professional one. His jokes turn darker, and his usually sharp instincts seem to be failing him. The world around him starts to feel like a funhouse mirror. Everything is distorted. He starts seeing Robert everywhere, in the background of a movie, in the reflection of a window, in the faces of strangers on the street. It's as though Robert has become a shadow that Nick can't escape. The more he digs, the more questions arise. Is this a case of mistaken identity? Or is Nick being manipulated in some deeper, psychological way? He can't shake the feeling that someone is orchestrating every move he makes. His mental state deteriorates, and his dark humor becomes increasingly cynical. Nick starts to believe he's being watched. Someone is always one step ahead, pulling the strings. The breaking point comes when he receives a package at his office. Inside is a photo of himself from years ago, standing next to Robert. It's the first time Nick's connected the dots. He knows this man, but how and why was this kept a secret? Nick is forced to confront his own past. A series of flashbacks reveals that Nick and Robert knew each other years ago, but Nick had blocked it out. They had been involved in a traumatic event that Nick has repressed, an incident that led to a fallout between them. Nick starts to question everything about his life. Had he been manipulated by Robert all along? Or has his mind been playing tricks on him? The case takes a turn as Nick revisits Miriam, who now seems eerily calm. "You're getting closer, Nick," she says, almost as if she knew exactly how everything would unfold. Nick's suspicions grow. Maybe Miriam has known about his past with Robert all along. The deeper he digs, the more surreal the case becomes. Is Miriam in on the game, or is she simply a pawn too? And what is the connection between all these strange encounters? The case has become a personal hell for Nick. The pieces of Robert's disappearance no longer matter. What he thought was a simple investigation has morphed into a full-on psychological assault. His mind has been twisted, contorted, and played with in ways he never expected. And now, standing in a dimly lit apartment, facing Samantha, the truth starts to unravel. Samantha, the bartender who had once seemed like nothing more than a quirky ally, is standing in front of him, her usual sardonic smile gone. There's no humor in her eyes now. She's calm, almost serene, as though everything has gone according to plan. The final piece of the puzzle has clicked into place. "You knew all along," Nick says, voice low, almost a whisper. His head is spinning, his hands shaking. His detective instincts are still working, but they're clouded by the weight of the truth. "You manipulated me this whole time." The clues, the riddles, it wasn't about Robert, was it? Samantha's lips curl into a faint smile, but it's not a smile of amusement. It's the smile of someone who's known they had you all along. "You're not as slow as I thought," she replies, her voice smooth and cold. "But yes, Nick, this whole thing wasn't about Robert. It was about you. It's always been about you." Nick stares at her, confused and angered. "What the hell are you talking about?" Samantha walks slowly around him, her presence suddenly feeling suffocating. Robert's disappearance, it was just a diversion. A way to lead you to the truth, or perhaps a way to keep you from it. "Do you really think I was just some bartender, that I was helping you for fun?" "No, I've known you far too long for that." Nick's mind races. The flashes of memory are starting to make sense. His repressed memories, the moments he's tried to bury, they all connect back to a shared history with Robert. The traumatic event that he'd long since shoved into the back of his mind, the car accident, the deaths, the unresolved guilt, was all tangled up in this case. But he had no idea Samantha was part of it. The accident ... Robert was there. And one in Nick begins, but the words choke in his throat. "Yes, Robert was there," Samantha interrupts, her voice uncharacteristically firm. But the real question, Nick, is not what happened. It's why you've blocked it out, why you've been running from it for so long. That's why I put you through this. She pauses, letting the weight of her words settle in. I wanted you to remember. To face the truth, Nick's eyes narrow. You did this to me on purpose, the riddles, the clues, the endless mind games. It was all just to get me to crack. Exactly, Samantha replies, her tone almost clinical. I've been playing you, Nick. I had to. You had to remember. You needed to confront your past before it consumed you completely. Robert, Miriam, Danny, the clues, all of it was a game to get you here. To force you to face the fact that you're still living in the shadow of that accident, that guilt. You're not a detective anymore, Nick. You're a man running from his own demons. Nick stumbles back, shaken. The revelation hits him like a punch to the gut. Everything, the endless investigation, the strange behavior of everyone involved has been a setup to break down his defenses. His past, which he had carefully buried for years, was never truly gone. Samantha knew this. She knew how to manipulate him into finding the truth. And now she was standing in front of him, explaining it all with the same calm detachment as if she was explaining the plot of a movie. But why? Nick finally asks, his voice cracking. Why would you do this to me? Samantha exhales, her gaze softening for a brief moment. Because you needed it, Nick. I don't care about Robert. I don't care about the money or the case, but I care about you. You've been hiding from yourself for so long, living in that shell of a detective who doesn't feel, doesn't care, but that's not who you are. You're a man who needs to face what he's done, and now you have. Nick feels the weight of her words sink in, and for the first time in a long while, his usual deflecting humor fades. The jokes that once served as armor now feel empty. The walls he'd built to keep the world at a distance have cracked. And Robert, Nick asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert's gone, Nick. He's not the point. You are. You've been running for so long that you've lost sight of everything that matters. The game, it was a wake-up call. Nick stands there, silent for a moment, processing what Samantha has just laid out. He remembers the accident, the look in Robert's eyes as they tried to save him. The guilt that gnawed at him, the shame of not being able to save a man who was, in a sense, his brother. His best friend. It had destroyed Nick from the inside out, and he had buried it, locked it away. Was this some kind of therapy? Nick mutters, half laughing, half sobbing. Is this how you fix people? By driving them insane? Samantha shrugs. I'm not a therapist, Nick. I just knew you needed a push. There's a long silence. Nick's mind is spinning, the weight of the past crashing into him all at once. The realization is painful, but it's also freeing. For the first time, he feels like he's truly awake. Like he can breathe again. So, what now? Nick asks. Now, Samantha says, you face the consequences of everything you've done. You either move on from this or keep running. But you'll never forget it, Nick. Not anymore. Nick nods slowly, his head pounding with the weight of the revelation. He turns to leave, but as he does, he looks back at her. You know, I still don't understand you. Samantha smiles again, her usual humor returning. I'm complicated, but I got you here, didn't I? With that, Nick steps out of the apartment, finally free from the mental labyrinth he's been trapped in for so long. He still doesn't have all the answers, but he's learned one thing. Sometimes the real mystery isn't about solving a case, it's about solving yourself. The end. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. Thank you.